What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. I know I don't sound the best, unfortunately. After avoiding it for over 2 years, I ended up with COVID after CrimeCon. And I know I sound really bad. I feel a lot better than I sound. I've had to explain that to everybody over the past week because I am no longer sick. I'm past my quarantine, but my voice just will not come back at all. I tried to do this video a couple of days ago and it was just an absolute disaster, but this time I'm feeling better. My voice has come back a little bit more. I've got tea, I've got cough drops, so we're gonna try to go ahead and get this done because I've had nothing to do but sit and research cases and work on these videos, but I've not been able to sit down and film them, so you guys are about to get a ton of videos in the next week and a half. So today we're going to be speaking about the unsolved murder of 17-year-old Blake Chappell. Now, Blake originally just disappeared. It was October of 2011. He was walking home from his girlfriend's house after homecoming, and 2 months later, he was unfortunately found deceased. This is an 11-year-old case, you guys, and there is absolute madness happening in this case. His mother is desperately trying to find answers still all of these years later. There's a ton of speculation in this case. You could endlessly theorize with this one, but I honestly believe there are plenty of people, more than likely a lot more than just one or two people, that are out there that have all of the answers that the police need and that his mom needs to solve this case. I wanted to share the story as far and wide as I possibly could, and hopefully someone will grow a conscience and decide to come forward with the information that they have. But before I get into today's video, I need to say a huge thank you to Cara for partnering with me on today's video. I have spoken about Cara for years now. It's something that I have used for years now, but for those of you that haven't heard me rave about it either on here or on my Instagram, Care is a subscription service that sends high quality and personalized vitamins straight to your door every single month. Now, I try very hard to keep up with my health and wellness. Picking out vitamins is very overwhelming, or at least it's very overwhelming to me. I never know what I need, what's good for me, what's going to benefit my daily life. But Care makes this process very, very easy. All you have to do is go to their website, you take a short 5-minute quiz, you're asked about all of your health goals, and at the very end, it curates a list of vitamins just for you. I personally love how it goes into descriptions of all of the different recommendations, why it's recommended for you, where the vitamins are sourced, everything possible so that you're not left with any sort of questions and wondering what you're putting inside of your body. Now, in my daily packet, which is right here, it even says, "Hi, Danielle," which I think is the cutest thing ever. It's like a little hello to me every single morning when I open it up. 8 vitamins total inside of my packet, and honestly, I have 3 favorites that I have kept throughout all of the years of using Care of. The first one is fish oil, and I was so pumped when I learned about their fish oil. I have a very bad shellfish allergy, and a lot of the different fish oils that are out on the market contain shellfish, but I also have health issues that run in my family, so heart health is important to me. But thankfully, Care of has a fish oil vitamin that is made fully from wild Alaskan salmon, so it's something that I can take. I also take magnesium, and I have in these packets for years now because I go to the gym regularly. I want to support my muscle recovery. And then one of my other favorites that I've always made sure is in my packet is rhodiola, which is an awesome adaptogenic herb that helps with stress because, Honestly, Care is the only reason I've remembered to take vitamins the past couple of years. The packets are obviously really small, easy to throw into my bag while I'm on my way to the gym, or I can just go and grab one out of here and take it outside on the front porch while I have some me time eating breakfast before I take on the day. Everything I need is in one easy place, pulled straight out of here, and the fact that they deliver it straight to my door every single month helps my ADHD brain more than you could even imagine. It's also great because you can retake your quiz at any time. So if your needs change or you want to kind of reevaluate the vitamins that you're taking, all you have to do is go and retake the quiz and it'll tell you exactly what you should change around. Care is made from good for you, totally clean ingredients. You can feel good about what you're putting inside of your body, and you can avoid having 30+ vitamin bottles sitting in your cabinet, which, at least in my opinion, is always a pretty huge plus. They also have different kinds of powders. I've used their protein powders before. They also have little packets that you can just put into your water daily to help with things like energy. So there's a lot of stuff to discover on Care of. You guys can go and Take Your Care Of quiz to find out what is recommended for you, and then you can use the amazing code Danielle50 for 50% off of your first order, which is pretty awesome. Thank you again to Kara for partnering with me on today's video, and now on to the details of the case, and also a tea break because I can already feel my voice going out. Blake Chappell was born on February 7th, 1994, and according to everyone that knew him, he was a pretty incredible kid. He was mainly raised by his mother, Melissa, his whole life. I don't believe he met his father until he was about 10 years old. I don't know if they had a close relationship. It really doesn't seem like they did. So he was just one big mama's boy. He also had an incredibly colorful personality. He was always entertaining everybody. He was a master at Guitar Hero. He loved to rap. I think he rapped at his grandmother's wedding. He loved to skateboard. He loved playing sports, tennis, things like that. And he also loved to fish. But he also had an absolute heart of gold. According to Melissa, Blake would do absolutely anything for those that he loved. He had a knack at getting people to laugh. He was constantly bringing home stray animals to take care of. And occasionally he'd even bring home, other kids. If he had a friend or someone that he knew that didn't have a place to stay that night, if they got locked out because they were out past curfew, if they weren't sure where their next meal was going to come from, Blake was always the one to just scoop them up, take them back home with him. Him and his mom would make sure there was a cot on the floor for them to lay down and be able to have a good night's rest. They would make sure that they would fill their bellies. He was a caretaker. And all of this was done despite the fact that Blake and Melissa had their own share of struggles, and not just small ones either. In 2007, Blake's mom was disabled by a stroke, and this completely took her out of work. She had been working as a retail store manager. By 2008, Melissa had to move both of them back to where her parents were from in Newnan, Georgia, and in Newnan, they tried to push through. Blake was even very open about his experiences, even writing an essay in school that he called Poverty, and here is a little snippet from the essay. People in this world live day to day, cold, hungry, and alone, while most of us flaunt our money and spend it like it's nothing. I do not understand it. Don't get me wrong, some people chose to make the wrong decisions, which landed them in that kind of situation. But others don't choose to be that way. Believe it or not, I used to be poor. I lived for 3 months without a house, without a sense of stability and security, stuck in a horrible dream where everything was taken from me. I'm thankful for everything I have now. I have a sense of sympathy for those who have to live every single day like I had to. So as you can see, being taken out of work very drastically impacted their life. They were homeless for a period of time. Blake and Melissa, being who they are, they tried to see the best in every single situation. So remaining optimistic, they continued to build their life in Newnan. And Blake began to figure out his own ways to make money for himself. He noticed that the school vending machines were missing something that is absolutely essential for teenagers: Monster energy drinks. And so his solution was to go to the local gas stations and stores, buy up as many as he could, and then he would sell them after raising the prices at school to the students there. And this is how he was making money for himself. He was quite the problem solver. I've also seen that he was saving the little tabs off of the top as well. And one of his main goals in saving this money was to outfit his Kawasaki 250 dirt bike, which was another one of his all-time favorite passions. On October 15th, 2011, Blake planned to attend, and I hope I pronounce this right, East Coweta High School homecoming dance, and he was going to go with his girlfriend, Ryan. Now, after getting himself dressed and all together, Melissa, his mother, drove him to a nearby Kohl's because he was missing a very crucial part to his outfit. He didn't have a tie, so he went into Kohl's. There were a bunch of text messages exchanged between him and Ryan, picking one out, and then finally they settled on one that matched her dress, and Blake had one of the employees there tie it all spiffy for him. After this, Blake and Melissa headed over to Ryan's neighborhood, which is off of Avondale Circle in East Newnan, to take pictures, and Ryan's mother was going to be their chauffeur for the rest of the night. At Ryan's house, they took all of the typical pictures where the parents are doting over their children and how nice they look. And at 5:30 p.m., Ryan's mother drove both Ryan and Blake to Newnan Crossing to have dinner at a restaurant called Tokyo's. And fun little fact, Ryan said that Blake was so special to her because she had never dated anyone or really had anyone that loved sushi as much as she did. But sushi was one of Blake's favorite foods. It was way up there with beef jerky and monsters for him. So they enjoyed their dinner at Tokyo's, and then around 7 p.m., Ryan's mother picked them both back up. From my understanding, it wasn't quite time to be dropped off at the dance yet, so they headed back to Ryan's house where they watched a little bit of a movie before heading off to enjoy their homecoming dance. And according to everything that Ryan and Blake said, it was an amazing night. Blake ended up texting his mother a picture of him dancing, saying that it was the best night of his life. And at around 10:30 p.m., Ryan's mom once again showed up to collect both of the teenagers from the dance. From the dance at East Coweta High School, they then went back to Ryan's house where they were going to hang out for a little bit longer. They wanted to finish up the movie that they had started earlier. And after that, Blake was supposed to head home. And just a quick side note, Blake did have a phone. It was only a week or two old, and it was one that was only able to text. So he could not make any calls from his phone. But that night, he really wanted to kind of change his plans a little bit, and he wanted to stay at his friend Austin's house. So he used someone's phone at Ryan's home to call his mom, reach out to her at around 11 to 11:30, and ask if he could go and stay at Austin's house. Now, Austin lived about 3 miles away from Ryan in the Summer Grove neighborhood, so it wasn't anything very far. And he had plans the following day with Ryan at 11 a.m., so would have made things a little bit easier. He could just be picked up again from Austin's house, go and hang out with Ryan. But Melissa wasn't sure if this was a good idea because there had been a recent incident in the past couple of months that was very scary for both Blake and Melissa, and I will get into the details of it in a little bit, but Blake had not had the ability to go out and stay pretty much anywhere overnight other than at his own home since this incident, but Blake really wanted to stay with Austin. So after a conversation and coming to the agreement that he was allowed to go and stay the night there as long as he did not leave under any circumstances, Melissa agreed. So shortly after this, Ryan's mom drove Blake the 3 miles away to Austin's house for the night. But Blake did not end up sticking to his word. Shortly after arriving at Austin's house, they wanted to have some fun that night, so they decided to head off to a nearby BP gas station where they were going to attempt to buy cigarettes. Now, the gas station was closed, so they ended up having to just turn around and go back home. And according to Austin, they arrived back at his house at around midnight. For the next couple of hours, they were just hanging out, they were texting friends, and from the way it's explained, I believe that at some point, Austin decided to go off to his room and go to bed, and Blake was going to go to bed as well. But according to Austin, around 2 to 3 a.m., Blake came into his room and said, "Hey, just want to let you know that I'm actually going to walk back to Ryan's house." Austin said, "Okay, whatever, do what you want, but here's a jacket so you don't get cold." And he also gave Blake a house key so that Blake could get back in because Austin was planning on being asleep. Now, at this same time, Ryan has confirmed that Blake did send a text message to her somewhere around 2 a.m. saying that he intended on walking back to her house. Now, according to Google Maps, it should have taken around an hour for Blake to get to Ryan's house. He did end up texting her at around 4:30 in the morning saying that he still was on his way and was about to be there. And shortly after this, he snuck in through her bedroom window. According to Ryan, Blake was wearing black pants and also a white hoodie with Aeropostale written across the front of it in brown letters. This was, in fact, his jacket, so I guess he didn't take Austin's jacket. And after arriving, Blake got into bed with Ryan, and they apparently spoke about their day, spoke about the dance. Within 30 minutes, Blake ended up being caught. So right around 5 a.m., Ryan's grandmother probably heard them talking and came into Ryan's room. He made an interesting attempt to hide underneath the blankets, which, probably didn't work out too well for him because he was seen anyway. And immediately Ryan's grandmother was like, no, I'm going to tell your mom right now. So Blake said goodbye to Ryan and boogied his way back out the window to leave. Immediately after leaving the house, Blake began to text Ryan repeatedly, apologizing over and over and over again. He was honestly such a good kid. I think he was really just trying to have fun. We all have been there, and he was very apologetic. He was texting Ryan. Ryan's mom was also texting him from Ryan's phone. He was saying that he was so sorry for coming over without permission, that that's not something he should have done, and he didn't want to break anyone's trust and things like that. And ultimately, Ryan's mom was like, you know what, it's all right, just calm down, it's going to be just fine. And the whole incident seemed to kind of blow over. Now, at about 5:30 a.m., 30 minutes after he left, Blake was still texting Ryan, talking about how it was very cold out there, and he said that he was being pulled over by a police officer. Now, within a few minutes of being pulled over despite being on foot, Blake texts Ryan again and says that this police officer had taken his ID to look at, had asked him where he was headed, and then gave him some lecture about being out past curfew. But ultimately, the police officer was like, just keep heading on your way, and everything was fine. But after telling Ryan about this experience with this police officer, Blake stopped texting back. By 6:30 a.m., Ryan's mom came into her room and wanted to just check on her about Blake and his whereabouts. It had been an hour and a half since he had left. She wanted to make sure that he got to his final destination, but Ryan said that he had stopped responding to any text messages at around 5:30. By 9:30, when Blake had still not texted Ryan, they decided to reach out to Austin to see if he ever made it back to the house. Now, Austin woke up, started walking around the home to check for Blake, and Blake was not there. And there really was no indication at all throughout the entire home that Blake had made it back that morning. Now, frantically, Ryan and her mother head off to drive the two possible routes that Blake could have taken to go and look for him, and they picked up Austin along the way. From Ryan's house, and I will have a map up here, obviously I do not know Ryan's address, I just know the general area. I do not know Austin's address, I just know the general area, but you can see that there's two different ways that he could have gone. I know for a fact he would have had to go up Mary Freeman Road, and then he either would have had to take Lower Fayetteville Road or Summer Grove Parkway to get back to Austin's. Now, they searched along the sides of all of these roads. Austin hopped out at this point as well and began to look through the different trails in the area. This location is a big golf course, the Summer Grove Golf Course, and there's different trails people can walk all throughout, and obviously where people are, taking their golf carts and things like that. But there was absolutely no sign of Blake. Ryan and her mom, as well as Austin, were really clinging to the fact that Blake was supposed to have plans with Ryan that day at 11. So they were thinking that hopefully he would reach out by then. But unfortunately, 11 a.m. came and went, and Blake never did. Ryan's father had not been with them while all the searching was going on initially because he had left early that morning to start setting up and preparing for hunting season that was coming up. But when he did make it back by late that morning, he joined in on the search efforts. But by noon, they realized they could not find him. This was a serious situation, so Melissa was contacted to know that Blake couldn't be found and a missing persons report was filed. It was theorized that the most logical route that Blake would have taken was the Summer Grove Road one. It was the shortest, it was most direct, it was the first thing he would have come to when leaving his girlfriend's house, but despite extensive search areas around this area, there still was no sign of him. Despite communication with Blake to Ryan stopping at around 5:30 a.m., a few sightings began to come in, indicating that Blake may have still been in the area past this time. A picture was shown at a nearby BP gas station. I am assuming it was the same one that they had tried to go to the night before, but I cannot say for sure. And the clerk said that he had in fact seen Blake early that morning. The clerk said that at around 7:30 a.m., Blake approached the BP gas station and asked him when it was going to open. When the clerk told Blake it was going to open at 8 a.m., so 30 minutes from then, Blake headed back off on foot in an unknown direction. There was also another sighting at a QT, so a quick trip gas station nearby, but I'm unsure of the details of this sighting. I do know, however, that police have said that they cannot confirm either of these. Now, I will say that, again, I love my Google Maps, and I tried to look, and I've not been able to find a QT gas station closer than about 6 miles away, which seems pretty dang far for someone that was on foot. However, I'm also looking at this map a decade later, and I don't know what has changed in that time frame. So now to get into why Melissa was so worried about Blake staying at Austin's house to begin with, and why she did not want him to leave for any reason. And while this may be entirely unrelated to his disappearance, there's also a chance that it has absolutely everything to do with his disappearance. In May of 2011, so just months prior to Blake vanishing, Blake was pretty badly assaulted. He had been living in Clayton County, Georgia, and had just broken up with his girlfriend at the time, not Ryan, but a different girl. And a week after the breakup, Blake's ex-girlfriend ended up calling Melissa in tears, like an absolute shambles. And she asked Melissa where Blake was. Now, because this was a fresh breakup, she didn't want to start any drama. She did not want to get in the middle of anything. She actually ended up lying to this ex-girlfriend about where Blake was at the time, and then the conversation ended. Then 30 minutes after this phone call, Melissa gets another phone call, and this time it's the ex-girlfriend's mother. She asked Melissa if Melissa has any idea where her daughter is. She explains that her daughter had decided to run away from home, scrawled a lovely phrase of "I hate you," BITCH, in lipstick in their home, and then took off without her cell phone. Melissa explained to her that she had just spoken to her daughter on the phone about 30 minutes prior. I do find that interesting because the daughter allegedly ran off without her phone. I don't know if she called Melissa before leaving asking where Blake was, or if she, did actually have her phone on her, which could potentially be important because of later details I will say. But either way, Melissa said, she asked where Blake was, but I lied to her. I did not give her his real location because I just wanted to avoid issues. For this 16-year-old girl who had run away from home, Melissa proceeded to tell this girl's mom where Blake was, gave her the exact address just in case this ex-girlfriend somehow managed to find him so that she could safely be brought home. Now, right after hanging up the phone, the ex-girlfriend's mom immediately went to the location that she was given that Blake was at the time, which was the Hunter Ridge Trailer Park. This was a place that Blake frequented. A lot of his friends were there. It was literally a neighborhood just filled with all of the local kids. And she ended up confronting Blake. She found him and said, "Where's my daughter?" But she quickly realized that her daughter was not with Blake. Blake was just there with a couple of his friends. But despite this, Blake's ex-girlfriend's mom ends up calling Melissa back and angrily says, "Blake better not be hiding my daughter." Now, while these accusations are being thrown at Blake that he is hiding this 16-year-old girl that he had broken up with a week prior, he just brushes all of this off, hops on his bike, and decides to go and search for this girl himself. He knows the places she likes to go, things like that, and he obviously wants to make sure that she's okay. And after a while, he does end up finding her. She was on a park bench beside a pond nearby, and she was dressed head to toe in his clothing, which is strange to say the least, but we will again get more into that in a little bit. Blake put his ex-girlfriend on the back of his bike and had every intention of going to the closest phone he could possibly find and get her to call her parents to come and get her and let them know that he was safe. Now, while all of this is going on and Blake is off trying to search for this girl, there's about 3 dozen people, most of them kids Blake's age, all hanging out in this main area of this neighborhood. Most of them know Blake, so his mom is getting just constant calls updating about the situation, that Blake is going to try to find this girl, that the mom showed up. And then they also called to let her know that the ex-girlfriend's stepfather had shown up as well, and he had shown up with a couple of guys with him. Stepfather walks up to one of Blake's friends, lifts his shirt up, flashes a gun, and asks where Blake is because he has something for him. And unfortunately, as Blake is trying to get this ex-girlfriend to a phone to call her parents to pick her up, he's intercepted by the stepfather. Her stepfather proceeds to knock Blake off his bike. He pistol whips him. And then as Blake is on the ground, he repeatedly kicks Blake in the head, in the ribs, pretty much anywhere he could kick him, over and over and over again. And this is all happening, this grown adult physically assaulting a 17-year-old kid, while dozens of other kids and likely adults are watching it happen. The stepfather then takes his stepdaughter, throws her in the trunk, which is something that she has since said didn't actually happen, but other witnesses claim that it did, and takes off. Now, Blake's friends frantically call his mom and say he just got attacked. The stepfather came and got him. And Blake's mom and some of Blake's friends end up both calling 911 to come and help him. Now, Blake is so messed up that his friends have to physically pick him up. He cannot get up and walk on his own, and they have to carry him to a nearby house until medics can arrive and assess him. Now, when the EMS does finally arrive, they tell Blake that he needs to go to the hospital. He was in really bad shape, and they also believed he had a severe concussion. But unfortunately, because of the fact that Blake's mom was on disability, couldn't work, they didn't have a lot of money, he refused to go to the ER because he didn't know how much it was going to cost. So he flat out said no, and instead his mom took him home and tried to nurse him back to health. So after this horrifying and traumatic event, Blake is talking to his mom about it and mentioned that his ex-girlfriend was wearing all of his clothes. I'm talking down to his shoes. And he said that these were clothes that he had never given to her. Like, this is stuff that he had recently seen. There was no way she should have had those belongings. And he starts to say that he believes that this was all a setup, that she had basically been a part of this scheme to lure him out so that he could be attacked in order to get back at him from breaking up with her. And when Blake tells this to his mother, she starts to remember something that happened just days prior to this attack that she originally had thought absolutely nothing of. So the ex-girlfriend had shown up to their home when Blake was not there, and she explained to Melissa that she had a few items of Blake's that she wanted to return to him, and that there were also a few items of hers in Blake's room that she wanted to get back. So again, not thinking anything of it, Melissa sent this girl to Blake's bedroom to do whatever she needed to do. But now, because she had these clothes, all this strangeness, it was seeming more like she had gone into his room to take his belongings instead of doing what she claimed she was going to do. It's honestly just a very strange situation entirely. After this incident, Blake and Melissa were very set on pressing charges. So the police were contacted and a report was taken. Melissa gave the police all of the information to get in contact with everyone from his ex-girlfriend's family, information about the stepfather that had physically assaulted him. She told them the events as she knew them, and she was told that there would be an investigator assigned to the case. Now, they had told her that they'd already tried to reach out to the ex-girlfriend's family, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful at the time. So the following day, when Melissa receives a phone call from someone claiming to be an investigator, she didn't think anything of it. She's like, okay, they said they were going to assign an investigator. In her mind, why wouldn't they immediately call to get this case dealt with? This is assault. This is scary. The investigator asked Melissa to recant the events of that day again, and Melissa also informed him that since she had spoken to police originally, she had found out that the stepfather went back to the neighborhood after the assault and essentially threatened all of the witnesses into silence, saying that if they said anything, they were going to get it. And this is like a bunch of teenagers and kids. But there was a little bit of an odd response from the investigator, because the first thing he said was, well, why would he have done that? Which in almost a shocked or irritated kind of way, but again, this was just brushed off. 2 weeks passed after speaking to the investigator, and there was absolutely nothing. She didn't hear a word until all of a sudden she received a call from Jonesboro Police Department. The person on the other end of the line introduced themselves as the investigator on the case. This investigator proceeds to apologize for not being able to call her yet. There were just some other things going on, and Melissa says, wait a minute, I already spoke to an investigator 2 weeks ago. And the investigator on the phone this time says, that doesn't make any sense. I'm the only investigator on this case. I don't know who you could have possibly spoken to. So obviously she explains everything all over again to this investigator, and afterwards is like, you know what, there's something very wrong here. So she reaches out to her phone company and gets all of her call logs and information and goes down to the call that was made to her from the original investigator, only to find out that it was the stepfather that had called her. No wonder there was this odd response of, well, why would he do that? When Melissa informed this investigator, aka stepfather, that the stepfather had threatened the witnesses into silence, he was basically just trying to see, are they pressing charges? What is she saying that I did? That's impersonation of a police officer we'll get there. It's very scary and very bad. But at this point, Melissa is hopeful. There's someone actually on the case. I spoke to a real investigator. All this information is relayed about the fact that it was the stepfather that had called her. So you would think that positive things would happen from this point out, but unfortunately, that is not what ended up happening. 3 weeks after this, Jonesboro Police Department reaches out again, saying that they want Blake to come in so they can, quote, close the case up. This made absolutely no sense. Melissa and Blake wanted to press charges, and it didn't even seem that anyone had worked on the case yet. So it goes from speaking to the investigator one time to all of a sudden they want to close the case. In the next conversation, this didn't make a lot of sense. This wasn't what they wanted. So Melissa and Blake went in to speak to the investigator, assuming that they could very easily clear this up. Now, when they got there, the investigator came to take Blake and speak to him. And obviously, being 17, he said that he wanted his mom to be there, but very quickly that was shut down. Blake was told that he was old enough to handle it on his own, that she was not allowed to go up there with him. They aggressively slapped a visitor's sticker on his chest and took him off without a lawyer, without his mother, a 17-year-old kid. After a few minutes, the investigator came back down to speak to Melissa, and laughing, he says, well, Blake lied about everything, and entirely dismissed the claims by Blake, by his mother. I can't imagine having to hear that after all of the strange things that had happened, after he was attacked by an adult for absolutely no reason. It was heartbreaking. It absolutely shattered them. There were over 36 witnesses to this incident at the trailer park that day. The ex-girlfriend had even admitted that her stepfather did in fact assault him. She was there. Melissa even ended up standing behind the stepfather in line at a gas station shortly after the incident and heard him bragging about it to someone, saying that he had beat up this kid and broken his hand. She found out that there was both video and audio recordings of his confession in this gas station and told police about it, but for some reason the police refused to go and get it. They had everything that they needed right in front of them to do something about this assault on Blake, and instead they accused Blake of lying, and not just that, they slapped him with charges of his own, and pretty hefty ones at that. Blake ended up being arrested and charged with custodial interference. It was explained that because Blake was 17 and the girlfriend was 16, that he was technically an adult, and because when she left her home, she made it clear that she was going to go to Blake, that somehow it's his fault and he was interfering with custody of a minor because she chose to run to him. And from the way I've seen things explained, these charges were essentially brought on because the ex-girlfriend's family pushed for them. And this makes absolutely no sense. Melissa had lied to this young girl, telling her the wrong location that Blake was at to try to avoid her going and causing any drama. Blake had no idea that she was coming to see him. And when Blake did find out that she was missing, the first thing he did was try to go and find her. And then when he found her, he told her to call her parents and that she needed to go home, which again is something that she confirms he did. She specifically said that he tried to do the right thing. So how he ended up with these charges is honestly absolutely beyond me. He ended up spending 16 days in jail over this. The entire time he was desperately trying to raise money for the bond to get himself out. And then once he was finally released, the court date was set for October 24th. During all of this time, after Blake had the crap kicked out of him, after Blake ended up being arrested for something that was not at all his fault and the reality of the situation, things still didn't stop there, because according to Melissa, her and Blake were absolutely terrorized by the ex-girlfriend's family. They were woken up by beaming lights. She said like police lights, like the headlights directly coming into the back of their house at like 3 a.m, scaring the absolute crap out of them. They had animals of theirs killed. They were stalked. And at this point, none of it was reported because they didn't feel safe going to police with anything, because the times that they had gone to them, it had been turned around on them. Blake ended up being arrested. They didn't trust them. They felt like their only option, which is absolutely devastating and heartbreaking, was to pack up and move in the middle of the night to avoid being followed. From there, Blake and his mother moved completely out of Clayton County to try to escape this disastrous mess. Blake was told by his mom to refrain from speaking to a lot of his old friends. They were really trying to hide their location. But unfortunately, according to Melissa, they were very quickly found anyways, and the stalking and the harassment continued. According to Melissa, Blake changed after this. Understandably, she started to notice that he had selective mutism. When he got scared, he would basically completely lose his ability to speak. He was traumatized, you guys. He had gone through something absolutely horrifying. But again, being the resilient family that they were, they tried their hardest to push through. Blake continued his summer, trying to enjoy his time. He ended up getting a new girlfriend, Ryan, that he had a lot in common with. They had a ton of fun together, but so much of their life changed after this. This is why Blake didn't go and spend the night at friends' houses. Melissa and Blake were both scared that he would be attacked again, especially when they know they're being followed, when they know there's this harassment going on, their own animals are being killed. Melissa just wanted to keep Blake safe. So essentially, when she allowed him to stay at Austin's house and he vanished in the middle of the night, this was her worst nightmare come to life. Especially after Blake disappeared, it was believed that he simply ran away by some, not all. Even Ryan had mentioned it was something in the back of her mind. Everyone knew that this court date of October 24th was coming up. I'm sure that was something very scary for him. I don't think he had had any run-ins with police up until that point, but I could be wrong. So I can imagine that's horrifying. But that date came and went, and the charges ultimately were dropped. Granted, allegedly, the stepfather said they were dropped unless he saw Blake's face again. So even knowing this kid's missing, he's still threatening him. But even with these charges dropped, you'd think if Blake was running from them that he would come back at that point, but he didn't. Police ended up speaking to over 50 different people in regards to Blake's disappearance. A lot of them attended the high school, had gone to the homecoming dance the night before. Multiple searches were done all throughout that area, but still there was absolutely nothing. Now, obviously, one of Melissa's big questions, which was the first question that I had just looking into this, was what about this officer that stopped him? First of all, the wording is a little bit weird in my opinion. Blake was allegedly on foot, but he said he had been pulled over as if he was in a vehicle. However, I feel like that's also possibly just something you immediately, I'm being pulled over, the second lights come on, whether you're walking or not. But the main thing that I really wonder about this, and everyone wondered, was, is it possible that this officer could have some sort of insight? We know this officer spoke to him for a few minutes, gave him a whole lecture, asked him where he was going, where did he say he was going? What was his mood like? What direction was he headed in? There's all these things that could possibly be answered. And after all, this could be the last person that saw him, this police officer in Newnan. But when police started to look into this, which from what I've seen, it took a lot of pressure for them to kind of look into this from Melissa and other people, they have absolutely no record at all of anyone stopping Blake that night. Newnan Police and pretty much every police department ever, it is a requirement to call in when you are about to make a stop for everyone's safety, for the safety of the officer, for the safety of the person that they're stopping. But was he actually stopped by a police officer, or was this someone impersonating a police officer? No police officer came forward to say, hey, I was the one who stopped him that night. This is what he said. This is where he was going. This was our conversation. So obviously this has created a ton of speculation. And Melissa's mom has come forward and said in a handful of interviews, she wants the police to GPS track everything. Look at the police officers' phones, look at the GPS on their car. Was there anyone in the area that could have stopped him that night? But I don't know if that has ever been done. Police have not said it's been done. More strange things just continue to happen. 5 weeks after Blake vanished, his mom received a phone call from a blocked number. When she answered this phone call, no one on the other side of the line said a single thing. It was clear there was some connection there because she could hear a TV going faintly in the background, but no one said hello, no one said anything. She repeatedly said, Blake, hoping that maybe this is a phone call from him, but still nothing. And you guys, this went on for 5 minutes until she finally said, I can't do this anymore, and hung up the phone. Melissa stated that she strongly believes that whoever called her that day had Blake or at least knew his whereabouts. But 2 months after Blake disappeared, his remains ended up being found. Police received a phone call from individuals that had spotted a body floating face down in a creek in the Summer Grove neighborhood, so the area that he was heading to after leaving Ryan's house, right beside the Summer Grove golf course driving range. When police arrived, they found a young male face down in the water wearing only underwear and an undershirt. The body itself had started to turn black due to decomposition, and based on the piercings, which was 2 lower lip piercings and a tattoo on his chest, they were able to say that this was the body of 17-year-old Blake Chappell. Everyone was heartbroken. Why on earth was Blake stripped down to his underwear? Where were all of his belongings? He had on a sweatshirt, he had on black jeans, he had on socks and shoes. Despite searching hundreds of yards in either direction of this creek, his phone was never found, his wallet was never found, his clothing was never found, and even stranger, the location where he was found, it's pretty much directly by the last place it's believed that he was. Blake had mentioned to Ryan in his text messages that he was near a bridge. He was about 30 minutes into his walk, and using Google Maps, all of that points to him being right on the bridge, right over this creek by the golf club. But if he had been in this creek this entire time, this whole 2 months, how was he not found in all of the searches? Especially because that's the information they were going off of in their searches. This was the main area that they were focusing on. But to add to that, police said that based on the state of his remains, they believe that he'd only been in the water for maybe a week. An autopsy confirmed that this was in fact a homicide. Blake had died from a gunshot wound to the head, but other details in his autopsy report were held and are still being held very, very close to the vest. Police will not say how many times exactly Blake was shot, just that they know that it was a shot to the head that killed him. They won't state the caliber of gun that's been used. I've seen somewhere that they have said it's between a 22 and a 45 caliber gun, but that pretty much just leaves the floor wide open for any possibility. They've not stated if there were any other injuries to his body, which his mom genuinely wants to know, because that could potentially indicate if he was held somewhere for 2 months, because where was he this whole time? And I understand that not having this information is so incredibly frustrating to those that love Blake and want these answers, but police have said that the information that they're withholding is information that only the killer would know. They have no murder scene, so they have no idea where he was killed. They have no place to look for any sort of evidence. They had no way to figure out how long he had even been deceased, so they don't know the time of death. I've seen that it was labeled that early morning, the last time there was communication on his death certificate, but I've also seen that it's just labeled as undetermined or unknown. So they really don't have a lot of physical evidence to go off of, and Blake had at least been in the water for a week, and through all of my research and everything we've ever spoken about, you know exactly what that means. Water probably totally stripped any physical evidence off of Blake's body. I'm sure they are just holding on to everything that they can to protect the integrity of the investigation, because they don't have a lot of things you would typically be able to collect as evidence in a homicide investigation. At least that is my absolute hope. But on the flip side, it's also been well over 10 years at this point, and there are still no answers in the case. So between that and his mom's previous experience with police, I honestly cannot blame her for being frustrated and questioning a lot of things in her son's case. According to an interview with Melissa, police did turn Ryan's family's home absolutely inside out, because they, along with this suspicious police officer, were the last people known to have been with him, and obviously their last encounter was not necessarily the best, because they had to run him out for sneaking into the house, but they totally turned the house inside out looking for evidence. I think a lot of people possibly questioned that they were potentially involved, that didn't know the case very well or know either family very well. From some things that I've seen on forums, I know some people questioned the father going out that morning to set hunting things up. But after extensive questioning, which they happily sat for, searches of their home, multiple lie detector tests, the whole 9 yards, it is very clear that they are not involved whatsoever. Melissa has also made it very clear that they have gone through absolute hell and back. They loved Blake so much. They have been present in all of the searches and they have done everything they possibly can to help out in the investigation. And Ryan's mom has just beat herself up for not going to get him when he was obviously upset for getting in trouble for sneaking in. She said that she regrets not just hopping in the car and going to get him to make sure he safely got to his destination. So then the next possibility, that is one that is spoken the most about online, is that somehow the stepfather had something to do with this. There is a very obvious reason why this is believed to be a possibility. This is something that Melissa has said she theorizes. It doesn't go without backing. According to her, there's all these different instances where this family has stalked them and terrorized them. Unfortunately, there are not these police reports to now back those accusations up, which that's such a double-edged sword, because the only reason it wasn't reported is because all of their other reports of things had totally been taken as absolutely nothing. It's obviously clear that the stepfather is capable of harming someone because in front of dozens of people, he pistol whipped Blake. According to police, the stepfather of Blake's ex-girlfriend has also apparently been cleared as a suspect, which honestly, I take that with a grain of salt simply because his multiple other crimes were just completely ignored. This aggravated assault, he had a deadly weapon on him, apparently totally ignored, impersonation of a police officer, threatening witnesses that weren't acted on. So you can understand my kind of loss of faith here and why Melissa thinks the same way. But again, police say he was not involved. Deputy Chief Riggs has stated that 2 potential suspects have been cleared and a third suspect, quote, cannot be placed in Coweta County at the time of the killing. And I don't know if those 2 are like Ryan's family and the stepfather. Who would the third be? I have absolutely no idea. Then Lieutenant Chris Robinson, who took over the case in 2019, said, quote, I don't know how long he was in that creek. From the time he went missing to the time he was found, it made the physical evidence a little more difficult. So this tells me that as of 2019, that entire decade, they really had still not found pretty much anything. But there are definitely a lot more questions. Now, according to Austin's mom, there was a third boy at her home that night, which is like totally not mentioned in absolutely anything. She apparently spoke to Melissa and said that there was this kid there named Tavis, not Travis, but Tavis. And somehow there's like absolutely no information on this boy, which I just cannot figure out for the life of me. I don't know if Austin has been able to help Melissa saying who Tavis is and if he was in fact there or not. It seems only Austin's mom has really mentioned it. No one seems to know who he is. No one's come forward to say anything. He wasn't mentioned when Austin said that they went to the BP for cigarettes. So we have this potential third kid there that's mysteriously just like vanished and there's no information on. Blake also had a backpack that he had taken to Austin's, but according to Austin, it was left at his house, so he didn't take it when he went off to see Ryan, and they apparently lost it in a move. So Melissa was not able to get any of those items back. Also, according to what Austin has said, he gave Blake one of his jackets, but according to Ryan, Blake was wearing his own jacket that he had packed in his book bag that night. So I don't know where Austin's jacket went, if Austin still had it. I mean, I know that might sound unimportant, but I wish we had a little bit more of a description, because that could be something out there that people could be searching for that maybe has some sort of answers. There's just a lot of weird information out there that no one seems to be able to figure out. Since her son's murder, Melissa has faced even more struggles. She was diagnosed with both diabetes and breast cancer, and she ended up having to move to Texas for treatment, where she essentially was crowd surfing the entire time. She still has absolutely no clue what happened to her son, and she feels like police should be telling her more. She said in an interview, quote, "They won't tell me anything about the condition of Blake's body. Did he have broken bones? Was he run over? Or were there marks around his neck? Was there evidence of him being tied up?" Melissa theorizes that maybe Blake was taken against his will on this walk and held somewhere for weeks until ultimately he was killed and dumped in the location that he was taken from. Or maybe he did go willingly, but he realized he was in danger and wasn't able to get himself out of it. I don't know if police have confirmed this or not. I think it seems pretty obvious that that the murder scene was not necessarily in that location. There were so many searches and things done all around that bridge, along that creek, in that area, and they were searching immediately afterwards. There was no sign of a struggle anywhere. There wasn't blood from the gunshot wound, at least that they found. So that really does support this idea, along with the fact that it seems he was only in the water for a week, that he was taken and killed somewhere else. But why on earth and who on earth did this? I've sat and racked my brain trying to figure out what on earth could have possibly happened to Blake. And all we really know for sure is that all of Blake's movements overnight that night were not anything anyone would have really known about. Like, they were all last minute decisions. Like, it was a last minute decision at like 11:30 p.m. to stay the night at Austin's house. It was a last minute decision for him to leave Austin's house in the middle of the night and walk to Ryan's house. He also planned on staying at Ryan's longer until he was caught and then quickly left to walk back. These are things that only Austin would have known, Ryan and his family would have known, and Blake, and that's pretty much it. I don't know if there's any evidence that he had communicated with anyone else that night, saying that he was at Austin's house, saying that he was planning on sneaking back over to Ryan's. But I feel like that really takes away a lot of possibilities of someone knowing where he was, knowing what he was doing, and being able to attack him, unless somehow someone was told about it. Melissa has openly questioned if somehow the stepfather had been following him and took an opportunity, or if someone was following him for the stepfather because they had been followed for months prior to that at that point. But if he was being followed all night, I mean, there was an opportunity to take him on the walk from Austin's house all the way back to Ryan's house in the middle of the night. So I feel like that opportunity possibly would have been taken if he was being followed. So that kind of goes to the next theory of someone basically ratted out his location. And I don't know if that's indicating this police officer that pulled him over possibly knew things and spread the information. We don't know. Melissa has also said that Blake was friends with kids that were related to the stepfather. Could they have possibly been involved? You know, what's going on with this random third kid that was at Austin's house that no one knows anything about? The other thing that obviously comes to mind is that there are horrible people out there that love to impersonate police officers to attack people, to lure people in. Is this a circumstance of that? Because the police cannot find any evidence at all that any of their police officers stopped him. There's just so many different ways that this can go. And it's so frustrating that there's not enough information to help police really figure out what happened. Newnan Police have created an unsolved murders page to feature cases, including Blake's, to hopefully continue to solicit tips. They have stressed that community involvement is crucial, especially in Blake's case, because there are likely a handful of people out there that know exactly what happened to him. If he was possibly held hostage somewhere, like, there is someone who knows something. The police need these tips so that they can follow them and keep pushing forward in the case until they're able to solve it. So if you've heard something that may just be a rumor, try not to determine that for yourself. Call that information in, share it with someone, get it in the right hands so they can put that in with the rest of the puzzle that they have and see if it fits or not. There's a $20,000 reward in Blake's case leading to an arrest, and I honestly hope that one day that's able to happen. Blake just seemed like such a positive person, and he had gone through so much crap already. And to see someone that just repeatedly was knocked down and picked themselves back up, brushed themselves off, still managed to make the world a brighter place, and then to see that in the middle of a random walk, they unexplainably vanish and then are killed. It was 5:30 in the morning. It was such a random time. No one would have known he was walking out there. It had to have been someone that knew something, that had been following him, or he is just one of these crazy victims of circumstance. As always, if you have any information at all in this case, I will link everything you possibly need down below to get that information in the right hands. Please share this video, share his story, share everything you possibly can in regards to Blake's case so that hopefully it either A, puts the pressure on someone and gets them talking, or B, gets his story in the right hands so that maybe someone with information that doesn't know they have it can bring that forward to help solve his case. That is all that I have for you guys today. I want to say a huge thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to Blake's story. It means the world to me, and I'm sure it means the world to everyone that loves Blake as well. If you haven't already, already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Howlin' fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.